the first episode of Super Games Buster, where I guess we're gonna sit down and talk about video games or something, I don't know. My name's Lewis, and I'm the Super Games Buster. What's a Super Games Buster, you ask? The purpose of the show is threefold. 1, I get to talk about the video games that I really like, or that I really hate, to an audience that may or may not care. I don't know. 2, I get to go through my backlog of video games that I never finished and actually, finish them.
I'm looking at you, Dark Souls!
And 3, I get to take suggestions on what to play from you, the audience, whether I actually know what game it is, or whether I don't, or whether I own it, or whether I don't. Although, if I don't own it, that might be a small issue because, money. Alright, with that out of the way, I want to talk about a game that I've owned for years now, but I never actually see that many people on the internet talk about it. I mean, I know everyone talks about its sequel, but no one ever talks about the first game. I'm talking about Son of the Enders. Look, I'm going to try to be as objective as possible, but I have to get this out there. Son of the Enders for the PlayStation 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. I mean, how can you not like it? The graphics, the soundtrack, and the gameplay, oh my god, the gameplay was just absolutely awesome to me. Not only was this one of my first giant robot games ever, but it is the most fun I remember having with a giant robot game. I also remember really clearly the first time I ever saw this game too. I remember walking past the electronics section in Target and just seeing a demo for this game that everyone was flocking over to. And then the moment I got my hands on the controller, I was just absolutely hooked. I mean, I was completely blown away. I was just sitting here grabbing the controller and slicing a whole bunch of other robots to ribbons with the speed of a Dragon Ball Z character. And at the time, I didn't even know that the person responsible for this game is the same person that's responsible for Metal Gear Solid. I mean, with that kind of pedigree, obviously this game's gonna be really awesome, right? Needless to say, I was really excited for this game to come out. And as far as I knew, everyone else was excited for this game to come out too. But unfortunately, Konami didn't have all the confidence in the world when it came to this game. So as a result, they decided that to push sales of the game, that they would package each copy of Son of the Enders with a demo for Metal Gear Solid 2, which was in development at the time. Now, to their credit, this did actually work. The sales numbers for Son of the Enders were higher than expected. But unfortunately, this led to the numbers not being reflective of how much interest there was in the game. Because now they had to take into account the fact that most people that actually bought a copy of Son of the Enders only bought it for the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. That's how badly people wanted to know about a sequel to Metal Gear Solid, by the way. I'm not actually kidding, this happened. But what about Son of the Enders itself? What about the game? Not the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. We're done talking about the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. Is it everything that they promised? Is it everything that we were expecting? Is it high-speed robot action at its finest? Let's find out. The game takes place in 2172 and starts off on the Antillia colony orbiting around Jupiter. Why is there a civilian space colony orbiting around Jupiter? We never find out. What we do find out is that there are 2 experimental orbital frames housed in that colony, and that a military force called Baram wants them. What's an orbital frame, you may ask? Well, it's apparently an experimental giant robot that runs on a new source of power called Metatron ore. They're fast, they're deadly, and everyone wants them. I'm not even kidding. Everyone and their mother wants these robots for themselves. Which brings us to one of the pilots. Oh my god. This is Leo Stenbuck, our protagonist. A 14-year-old kid that's trying to get away from all the chaos that's ensuing. Apparently he and his friends were caught foraging through someone's trash. And as a result, they were tied up and psychologically tormented. What the hell? Apparently foraging through people's garbage is now grounds for psychological torment. Anyway, since apparently adults have nothing better to do than to torment children, this goes on for a while, eventually culminating in the death of Leo's friends when a gigantic robot falls on top of them. Never mind the fact that we just met these characters and have absolutely no emotional attachment to them whatsoever. But doesn't this seem like something that could have been entirely preventable if this douchebag had just stopped tormenting these kids? I mean, I'm pretty sure foraging through your trash is not enough of a reason to leave them tied up to die. God, we're not even 5 minutes in and I already hate most of these characters. Anyway, Leo's friends are dead now and he takes it about as expected. Meanwhile, we see the culprit looming in the distance and they're... Wait, what? Maybe I'm looking too much into it. Maybe I'm just... I don't know, maybe I just... Okay, I see. We're just gonna move on now. So after crying in a corner for a bit, Leo goes back to running for his life. eventually ducking into a factory where he finds— oh, come on! This is Target Bravo, otherwise known as the orbital frame Jehuti. This is not only one of Barham's targets, but apparently the most unprotected orbital frame in existence if a 14-year-old kid can just stumble in and fall into the cockpit! Luckily, Jehuti comes with tutorials in the form of the artificial intelligence known as Ada. And from here, our gameplay begins. Now, keeping in mind that the gameplay was one of the selling points for this game, it goes without saying that this game needed to live up to the expectations that it set. On that front, the game passed with flying colors. Right from the get-go, the gameplay is smooth, responsive, and hectic, providing for a really fun hack-and-slash experience. And before dumping you into the tutorial, it even gives you the chance to try the controls for yourself, giving you a one-on-one fight versus an enemy orbital frame, and letting you take it out before the AI kicks in and tells you how to play. I want to bring this part up specifically because I thought it was really important in terms of how the game presented itself. Because by letting you play the game before actually dumping you into the tutorial, it feels like the game actually respected your intelligence in terms of being able to dispatch the enemy no matter what your level of experience. Not to mention, it actually felt like you were a little kid that got dumped into a cockpit with absolutely no idea of how to pilot it. And just like how Leo must have felt at that moment, you had to quickly figure out how the controls worked to be able to fight the enemy and survive. Now, I consider this one of the better parts of the game because it actually sets the presentation standard for the entire game. It perfectly blends the need for a tutorial with the actual context of what's going on in the plot. Because, I mean, in the context of a 14-year-old kid that just stumbles onto a robot and has no idea what's going on, it would make sense for the artificial intelligence to kick in and teach it what to do, right? But, I mean, it's not going to be immediate. It's not like the enemy's going to wait until the AI teaches him how to do things. You gotta take care of this first, even if you don't know how to do it. It makes sense. Once you fight the raptor and go through the tutorial, you get to leave the warehouse and actually go to the overworld. Now, it's here that the presentation of the game really shines. Not just in terms of what the game's throwing at you, but in terms of visual fidelity. Now, I can't actually back this up with any statistics involving other games that came out at the time of its release, but I thought that Son of the Enders was one of the better looking PlayStation 2 games that came out at its time. The frame rate is really smooth, the textures are really clear, and everything just looks really good, even the environments. Especially the environments. That was another thing that drew me in, actually, the environments in the space colony. I just thought the way the space colony looked when you were fighting in the overworld was really cool. I mean, you can see the actual circular shape of the colony ring all around you, and you can actually see Jupiter off in the horizon of the colony. Not to mention, you can see the rest of the actual colony in the backgrounds. And just that environment, it added to the presentation for me. I just thought it was really cool. I wanted to see more of it. And in this way, the game did a really good job of making me want to see more. I wanted to see what the game had in store for me. I wanted to play more of it. I wanted to get through the game and see this whole thing through. And I wouldn't have done so if the presentation wasn't so alluring and if the gameplay wasn't so fun. But anyway, I'm getting a bit sidetracked. Let's get back to the plot. So after you leave the warehouse, the first thing that happens is that you get sent waves of orbital frames to fight against. First the Raptors, which you already fought inside the warehouse, then the Mummy Heads, which are long-range units. But after that you get your first boss encounter. And before I do anything else, let me apologize because I actually completely forgot to talk about her. This is Viola, one of the lieutenants of Bahram. She's the pilot of the red orbital frame from the opening cutscene. This inadvertently makes her the killer of Leo's friends, which gives Leo a personal stake in all of this, whether he knows it or not. However, she's after Target Bravo, the orbital frame that Leo's piloting right now. As a result, she's more than ready to fight you for it. However, it's a pretty disappointing fight, especially given it stops halfway through for the sake of the plot. Still, it makes sense right now, given they have to give you something to look forward to, right? Keep in mind, I've just spent almost 10 minutes talking about nothing but the beginning of the game. So trust me when I say that we've already hit the high point. As much as I'd like to keep praising this game for its great presentation and gameplay, it kind of starts to drop off once you get into the bulk of it. It still has that allure that the presentation and the gameplay started you off with, but that allure starts quickly going away when you start to realize just how monotonous this game actually is. Once you chase off Viola, you're contacted by Elena Weinberg, the commander of a transportation vessel known as the Atlantis, which was tasked with taking Jehuti away from the space colony. Your actual goal during the game is to go through the process of getting Jehuti off the space colony. And while this sounds pretty exciting at first, the process by which you go about this gets really old really quick. Elena herself seems to be one of the more level-headed characters in the entire game though, and she actually serves as a really good foil for Leo, who just seems to be nothing but an over-emotional bundle of teenage angst. She does a good job of keeping everyone grounded on the situation, though.
Everybody will die.
And as a result, this makes her one of the only characters, aside from Ada, that give you any clear direction as to what to do. For the majority of the game, though, Ada's going to be the one that gives you your mission objectives. And it's actually kind of ironic, because the way she delivers all of this dialogue in that emotionless monotone kind of perfectly reflects the way all the missions that she gives you feel so empty. The world map for the space colony, though, is pretty damn cool, and it gives you a pretty good chance to admire all the environments in this game. But the world map is part of a bigger problem that I feel needs addressing. All the stages feel practically the same. Once you get to the world map, the rest of the space colony opens up to you by way of stages. These stages are just different parts of the colony with different artistic flair that either require you to fulfill X objective or kill X number of enemies. This isn't necessarily bad. When done right, this kind of thing can be really fun, like in most hack and slash or action platformers or such like that. But in this game, it feels really monotonous because all the stages have the same exact environment. Aside from the actual layout of the buildings, everything has the same color palette, everything has the same background, everything has Jupiter off in the corner, it has the rest of the space colony in the background, and while this was impressive at first, you start to realize that this is the only visual aspect that the game has to rely on. And I realize it's more a fault of the actual setting. That's just a product of the game taking place in a space colony. But there had to have been some way they could have circumvented that. For the most part, every stage involves defeating enemies and finding sub-weapon drivers. Oh yeah, by the way, you have sub-weapons. They're actually pretty cool, but at this point you start feeling a little bit bogged down by the entire thing. And it's not even because the sub-weapons aren't fun to use or anything like that. It's because at this point of the game, you've had enough exposure to realize that there are a lot of things here that could have been good if they worked on them a bit more, but instead just feel like they were slapped onto the game at the last minute. Did you know that there's actually a level up system in this game? Well, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, because it ultimately doesn't really matter and doesn't really change anything. Did you know that there's a segment where you have to shoot sniper bullets through a force field because you need a physical object to go through them? Well, it doesn't really matter because you only use it in one stage. Did you know that there's a part of the game where Ada gets infected by a virus and the entire HUD gets messed up? Well, it doesn't matter because in the stage after that, you immediately fix it. It feels like there are a lot of things here that could have been awesome if they worked on it more. But they're not. They're slapped on. And it wouldn't even be that big of a deal if the game had anything else to carry it. But all it has is the gameplay. The gameplay is the strongest aspect of this game. And while it's good, it's still not enough to carry everything. Especially when that's all there is. At one point, the plot is put on hold just for the sake of doing a lot of back and forth. In fact, the majority of the game is back and forth. Because the game introduces an SOS mechanic where you go back to past stages and fight all the enemies that you already fought, except this time you have to be really careful to not destroy any buildings or kill any survivors in the fights, because then the game starts penalizing you for it. And the really annoying part is that even though it keeps track of your statistics during these missions and tells you how many buildings got destroyed and how many people actually survived, and it even gives you a grade, by the way, it doesn't really amount to anything. It doesn't mean anything at the end of the game. It's just there for bragging rights.
This is not good game design.
Let's get the rest of the plot out of the way. After leaving the okay, I get it, cockpit, penis joke, Leo flies to residential block S02, which is apparently where he lives. There, he finds that his father is missing and hopes that he's alright. In addition, he runs into a friend called Selvis, who wants to go to the church to see if, air quotes, the children are okay. And directly after that, there's a boss fight. Afterwards, Selvis climbs into the cockpit of Jehuti and accompanies Leo throughout the rest of the game. And we never find out if the children are actually okay. From here, the rest of the game turns into practically filler. Nothing actually happens that moves the plot forward. All we get are random objectives to fulfill, and absolutely no motivation to fulfill them other than just to leave the colony. And while I'm sure that's enough for some people, I'm pretty sure there are others who want more than that. I'll give you the cliff notes to save time. There's a barrier blocking the way, and they can't get through. To get through, they need a weapon that can pass that barrier. They find a sniper rifle and shoot through the barrier. From there, they have to find emergency power generators and shut them down. Generator number 1 is easy to destroy. Generator number 2 is behind a force field. To get past the force field, you need a program to control the raptors. Once you get that program, you get past the force field and destroy the generator. With the generators destroyed, the main barrier's down. With the main barrier down, you can go to the other side of the colony. While on the other side, Ada gets nostalgic for some reason. She tells you about the factory where Jehuti's AI was created, and explicitly mentions that there's no need to go there now. Immediately after saying that, you get shot down by a huge laser. And after finding out that you actually have to run away from this boss fight, you find out that Ada has a virus. And now, you have to go to this facility that was in absolutely no way foreshadowed before this, obviously, and find the fix for Ada. After going to the factory and finding this fix, you have to find a way to deal with this new boss fight. This involves some more back and forth where you have to find a few more sub-weapons, and some more banter between Leo and Ada, which is supposed to equate to bonding somehow. Once you have the right sub-weapon, you can finally fight the second boss. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but look at some of this boss banter.
I'm not a kid.
There's the proof that you still are a kid.
What? Why do you do such terrible things?
I don't know.
Maybe you were playing GTA. For as much crap as I'm giving this game though, I do want to stop for a second just to talk about the boss fights. Because as monotonous as the rest of the gameplay seems at this point, the boss fights actually break up the monotony a bit by actually being hectic and fun like the game was advertising. Granted, the bigger the opponent, the easier it is to predict the pattern, but that doesn't change the fact that the boss fights still feel fresh and new. They feel like they're actually testing your skills as a frame runner. Not to mention, for as easy as some patterns are to predict, the later boss fights get really hectic and unpredictable. And I'm sure there's probably some people that actually know some of the patterns to some of the later bosses. But all the same, it's still hectic, it's still fun, it still encapsulates what the gameplay is trying to present. Anyway, now that the boss fights are over with, you're free to go to the mountains to escape the colony. However, before you do that, you're contacted by Elena. Elena tells you that your objective involves meeting one of her colleagues called Rock Thunderheart. I swear I'm not making that name up. This leads to Rock being confused that Leo is a kid, and Leo getting all uppity about it. As a result, Leo gets on his soapbox about how they don't care that people are dying, and in return, Rock snaps at Leo because the person who was originally supposed to pilot the orbital frame was actually a very close friend of theirs. He was, and I quote,
Alan was Elena's boyfriend, and my best friend.
And I swear this is getting really contrived at this point. I get what they're going for, I do. That no one escapes the losses of war, that everyone experiences the hardships of war. But are you seriously telling me that the kid that is piloting the frame right now just happens to be replacing the pilot, who just happens to be Elena's boyfriend, who just happens to be Rock's best friend, who just happens to, God, I don't even know what else. This is all just really contrived, and it's at this point that it gets really, really obvious. So you know what, let's just wrap this up. So after everyone's done getting on their soapboxes and talking about how people die, Rock tells Leo that he has to meet him in some sort of cargo lift. To do that, they have to get past the mountains, but there's an orbital frame stationed there that keeps trying to shoot them down. Because of that, they have to lay low when they're going through the mountains. And once they get to the dam, we have our third boss fight. Once you kick this orbital frame's ass, you go to the cargo area through the dam. And from here on out is the end game, so this is going to be spoiler territory. If you care about that, skip to this point in the video. I'll give you a few seconds. Once you enter the cargo area, you have a rematch with Viola, who apparently wants to play head games with you and mention your dead friends. This leads to an actually pretty cool boss fight, as well as a potentially interesting moment where Ada tries to self-destruct Jehuti and Leo says he wants to save her. My feelings on that can pretty much be summed up with what? But yeah, they manage to fight Viola off, and Leo, being the pansy ass that he is, refuses to kill her. Afterwards, he meets up with Rock Thunderheart, and Rock explains how Baram plans to destroy the entire colony. Why? Well, I'm sure there's probably a reason, but I really just don't care at this point. All you know is that your next mission involves disabling these bombs to save the colony. But not before Viola shows up and shoots your not-girlfriend in the back. I knew Sylvie was here for a reason. Now, Leo is more determined than ever to put a stop to Viola. And he proves this to us by sharing his entire backstory with Ada for some reason. He talks about how he was apparently an unwanted child and likes the fact that he's needed for something. Then again, if I had this selfish, whiny asshole for a child, I probably wouldn't want him either. Meanwhile, Ada admits that she does care about Leo and doesn't want him to die, proving that she does have a heart. But that's as far as that bonding time goes before we have to take care of the bombs. Once the bombs are taken care of, you have another rematch with Viola. And this time, her orbital frame looks like a freaking zombie, apparently. This fight is actually really tough. But it ultimately ends with one of the bombs exploding in front of her and sending her orbital frame careening into Jupiter. Apparently the gravitational pull is too much, and she's going to burn up in the atmosphere. But not before monologuing about how tough her life is. Oh my god, do these people ever stop. Anyway, with Viola out of the way, you're faced with the true final boss. The orbital frame Anubis, also known as Target Alpha. This frame is being piloted by Nomen, the head of Baram. And while it is Jehuti's sister frame, it is loads more powerful than Jehuti. Translation, this fight is unwinnable. Anubis teleports, is impervious to damage, and can take away a good chunk of your health with one hit. There is absolutely no way to win this fight. But don't worry, Elena's got your back. After a few seconds of fighting Anubis and basically trying to not die, the Atlantis flies in and provides some cover fire for you. Using the cover fire as a distraction, you escape the colony and dock with the Atlantis. So after all the crap we've been through, we can finally rest easy. We can finally just sit back and enjoy the satisfaction of a job well done.
Jehuti's duty on Mars is to penetrate the military fortress Alman, and to destroy the fortress from the inside by self-destructing Jehuti.
Jehuti will self-destruct?
Oh my god, Ada, can you just let me have this moment? So that's it. That's the end. Ada reveals that she's on a suicide mission, and Leo probably just went into shock because of this info. But that's okay, because you made it off the colony and everyone's congratulating you. And look, Sylvise is okay. That's a happy ending, right? Right? So that's it. That's the game. That's everything from start to finish. Is it everything they promised? Is it everything we were hoping for? Actually, yeah. I won't deny that there are a lot of things wrong with this game. The visuals offer no diversity, the level structure brings down the entire gameplay, the writing's overly dramatic and ridiculous, and the game is criminally short. You can beat it in just about 4 hours. Not to mention the plot, while conveying a good message, is absolutely laughable. And the voice acting, while hilarious and charming, kinda suffers a lot from the writing.
I'm not a kid.
But even with all of these flaws, I still think it gets a pass. Not because these flaws should be celebrated, in fact I want them to fix them, but because all the game promised was high-speed robot action. And even if it wasn't the perfect game that Kojima wanted to make, it still succeeded in giving us that high-speed robot action. It made us feel like badass giant robot pilots that could pilot machines that controlled like grease lightning. Not to mention it set all the necessary foundations for the sequel, which addressed a lot of the problems from the first game and is just overall considered a much better game. In fact, both games were re-released in an HD collection that only cost about $40 at launch. So if you get any version of these games, I recommend that one. The second game still has its own issues, and the HD collection doesn't really fix any of these present issues. But all the same, the HD collection is the definitive version of these games. Get the PS3 version though, because at least Konami's willing to patch that one. Don't make the mistake I made! Look, it's not the best game in the world, but I like it. And it was one of the games that I played a lot when I was growing up. I personally think this game at least deserves to be played once or twice, but as far as like, say, full retail price, I don't think it's quite worth that. If you think this might be a fun game for you, well, look at what I just showed you and form your own opinions. If not, well, okay, whatever. At least I talked about it. I don't know. Either way, this is Super Games Buster, and I'm out.